life. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Ever seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side, baby? Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there, somewhere.
Well, a very good evening from the United Kingdom. I'm Jessica Knock. This is Eating While Honey and Locusts, broadcasting from the base United Kingdom. And we have with us in the studio already Dr. Stephen Pidgeon from his secret location in Alaska. But we are so blessed to be with you today. It is an enthralling blessing every time that we connect with you. You know, I just want to get straight into it so we give time to Dr. Pidgeon, but I have a real sense of the Ruach HaKodesh. And that's the beauty of being able to transmit to you in your home, because you can make your screen, you can make your living room, or wherever you are watching this program, your altar, your place of presence, your place of intervention for Yahuwah, for Yahusha, for the Ruach to come and change and break your life. I want to tell you straight away and give you affirmation that there is a strong presence here, not because of anyone speaking, but because Yahusha, HaMashiach, is involved, and he speaks to the Father, interceding on the right-hand side, and the presence of the Ruach HaKodesh goes before us to intercede, to lift us up in our brokenness and in our wellness, whether we are at the peak or at the valley. He is here, and I want to extend that to you. You know, in a prayer program I did on Thursday, there was one person, his first name is Rick. He said he is so far away from Yahusha that he just can't sense him. And we prayed, we put worship on that program. He put his hands up and he said he has never experienced the presence in his own home like that. He could not put his hands down, and his life has changed. His prayer life is enhancing. He's feeling the Spirit go before him where he cannot speak. That is what this is about. So I want to uplift you to say, Yahusha, the Ruach, is with you. He goes before you. He affirms you because you are called, you are anointed, and you are appointed. And no weapon fashioned shall come against you. No weapon fashioned can prosper against you, because when he goes before you, nothing can come against you. You just keep on keeping on. And you know, Dr. Pidgeon gave a really sound piece of advice a couple of months ago. If you were flying a bomber plane, what would you do, Jessica? Would you give up? Because if you give up, you die. No, you keep on course and you keep on going. I want to say that to each and every one of you, because I know there are some of you that are grieving. I know others of you are feeling lost. Others of you are not knowing how to tally the word with what is happening in the world, or you just don't know how to bring the word together in this new experience of the Torah and the Hebrew, but you know that Yahuwah is there. Well, then this is for you. He goes before you. He goes before you. And yes, Ellen, keep on keeping on. Look, I want to say this because I really just sense that Dr. Pidgeon has something to just explode into your spirit today. But I want to say this to you because it's in my heart. Just like the disciples of old in Yahusha's time, when they said to him, show us of things to come, we are the disciples of this time. And we are saying the same thing. What are we to expect of times to come? Out of Yahusha's mouth, and I say this so often, he says that see that no one deceives you. That is a word for you today. In the times that we are living in every circumstance that you are facing, see that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name. Many will profess and preach in my name. Many will use my name to bring their doctrines about. You know, in the context that I'm speaking, I'm talking about religious circles. We all know, or you should know, that the government deceives. If you're still believing that you voted your president, your prime minister in, you're going to be in trouble. If you're still believing they're here for your own good, you're in trouble. Yahusha said, see that no one deceives you. And my word to you today is to apply this into every area of your life, your ear gates and your eye gates for what is being presented to you in every area. He was talking, Yahusha, about the religious circle that we surround ourselves in. See that no one deceives you. 2 Timothy chapter 3, I'm starting with 12 and going chopping, says, yes, yes, or yea, and all that will live righteously in Mashiach Yahusha shall suffer persecution. Do you hear that? Persecution, different types of tribulation and troubles and accusations. I'm looking at the bigger picture of how we navigate through these prophetic times, but I'm also speaking to the attacks and the assignments and the accusations that come your way now. Learn to walk this in the spirit and not in the flesh. Your retribution comes from Yah. He is your defender. He goes before you. He will bring judgment. He will bring retribution in his grace, his mercy, his love, and his judgment. That means we will suffer persecution. You know, there were 144,000, and that's referred to so many times. Some will say that's too little, that's too much. This is the point I want to bring through about the 144,000. They are the biblical true believers that walk through the tribulation, through the 7 years, who have not defiled themselves with the doctrine of women, not defiled themselves with women. That's what it means in that context. Comparing it to the versions, the 5 wise versions, it means they had not polluted or defiled their temples with prostitution, with a scarlet woman doctrine or a belief system. So as you're reading Revelation, and we've been delving into that since the beginning of these programs, you'll understand what that means. That is what a true believer is. You will is the operative word here, face persecution through, in terms of the tribulation, the 7 years of the tribulation and troubles you're going through now. Why? Because the next verse 13, goes on to say, even men who are seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. It's unrelenting. It keeps on going. Stand your guard. You can't do nothing. You stand your guard in the gates of Yahuwah's hand going before you. What's imposters and seducers in this religious circle? That's the evil men. That's the government. Then they're going to get worse and worse. That's why I said, and by now you should know, we don't take them verbatim and trust them. That's the destruction upon destruction, deceiving and being deceived themselves. They are deceivers. We need to recognize this spirit that we are contending and living in right now. If you go back and you read the whole thing from verses 11, 13 onwards, this is what you are to expect. This is what you are to expect because you are a true believer, and it's showing you in advance what the set apart, what the called out, the undefiled will go through. We set ourselves away from the scarlet woman belief system. Verse 11, persecutions, afflictions, which come unto me. This is what Paul is saying, what persecutions I have endured. But out of them all, Yahuwah delivered me. That is our promise. That means Yahuwah will deliver you from all persecutions and troubles in his timing, in his way. He just turns up on time. Well, it says this in Ezra 4 throughout. It says this in Enoch. It says this in Jeremiah, Revelation, so many of the prophetic books. There is a deliverance. There's a process to it. It's not immediate and it's not for everyone, but you can walk that way. And it, according to the holiness that you walk in, the way that you believe and you minister your prayer life, administer your prayer life. Ye, yes, all that live righteously in Yahusha will suffer. That means when you live a godly life in him, you will suffer. I'm not celebrating persecution. I'm not celebrating suffering, but I'm wanting to make you strong. We, Dr. Pidgeon and I, and the team here want to uplift you and make you that warrior good spirit. That's what this is about. Because that's what the time that we are in. There are so many evil men and imposters, and it's going to get worse and worse. That's worse. That's what verse 12 is all about. They will deceive many and will be deceived themselves, for they love not the truth. We said this on Friday. They love not the truth, but it is Yah who sends a strong delusion, for they know not the truth. That's why the strong delusion has been sent to them in the first place. That's what that spirit of slumber is about, a spirit of stupor that is sent upon them that we will stand against. But it is sent from Yah. Who are those imposters? Those imposters are the apostates. Who are those apostates? They're the type of people that say to you, I'll take the snake bite in 5 minutes. I work for the NHS. Trust them. They're looking out for your good. Take the monkeypox inoculation now and you will be fine. Do you know AstraZeneca means this, people? Listen, it's a Hindu word which means weapons that kill. It translates Nakiri, which is a Hindu word meaning sword, arrow, needle. How do they administer the snake bite? Through a sword, arrow, needle, weapon that kills. This is the level that we are dealing in, and we have to recognize this spiritually and physically, mentally, academically, and just be in the know. The CEO of AstraZeneca, when asked how they came up with that name, Weapons That Kill, said it's nothing to do with anything sinister. It's just we wanted the first and the last alphabet to be represented. And that was down to our marketing team. See that no one deceives you. The deceivers are being deceived and deceiving. That's the context that we bring this into. That's the 2 Timothy 3. Evil men will grow and get worse and worse, deceiving many. They are imposters. Isaiah 56, starting from verses 8 all the way through to 12. You'll have to read this later. 10 and 11, those verses, these imposters, this is what Paul is saying, who they are. They are watchmen, they are blind, they are all arrogant, they're all ignorant, they are dumb dogs, they cannot bark, they're sleeping, they're lying down, loving their slumber. Yes, they are greedy dogs, which can never have enough. They are shepherds that do not understand. They look their own way. They look for their own gain from their own quarter, and they're not interested in anybody else but their own gain. And as Stephen said on a Friday, you put 2 ministers together and it's how are we going to collect the offering? That's one of the things. These are all the dom dogs. They do not bark. They cannot sound the shofar. These programs, and when Dr. Stephen comes, it's about getting you in position to sound the shofar and to stand on that wall, ready and in preparation to sound and close the gates of impending danger. They love their slumber, and we must make sure that we are never in that position, that we are never the greedy dog, that we will never lose our understanding and love of the word, because then that is the strong delusion upon us. As shepherds, they know the truth, but they love not the truth. That is not the true believer. They all look their own way for their own gain. Come, they say, I will fetch wine and we'll fill ourselves with strong drink, and tomorrow will be more abundant than today. No, no, no. That's one pastor talking to another, an elder talking to another elder. Come and I'll fetch. Well, guess what, you greedy dogs? Shepherds, tomorrow will not be more abundant than today. That is the message that we have to get through. You know, Stephen says it so often, build back better. Have you heard that? Well, that comes straight into this verse. Tomorrow shall be better than today. Build back better. No, it will not be a build back better situation. It will not be a new normal, a better normal. For Jeremiah shows us destruction upon destruction. One man will seek to hear the voice of another, but will not hear it. For they will perish, it says in 4 Ezra, across the face of the earth, those who dwell across the face of the earth. That is the severity of it. This is what's going to happen. The beast of the field will come and devour the beast of the field in the forest. Yahuwah is calling them forth. Yahuwah is the one who calls these beasts of the field. In Hebrew, those beasts of the fields translates to evil affections on the face of the earth. This is evil inventions, evil weapons, coming upon us, everything that we have been facing for 2.5 years now. That is the context that I want to draw this in. We have to be like Ezekiel 9, where it talks about the angel with the inkhorn and the 6 destroying angels with the battle axes, destroying weapons in their hands, when they were given the command to go and smite with the instruction the city. But what did it say? Judgment starts in the house of Elohim, Yahuwah, first. That's why judgment begins at the house of Elohim first. And we've got to recognize that. We've got to get ourselves intact and in tow and make sure we don't have that judgment coming upon us. We cannot be a greedy dog. This is an opportunity to speak to those greedy dogs, but also to separate from them, because we're not in it for our own gain. You know, Moderna, the vaccine, is 66.6 milligrams of distilled phosphate. And with that brand, it's called Lucifer-In. The question that I want to ask you about this, people, is this. You know, how can you get these names all together? Lucifer-In. From all the millions of words, you bring those 2 words together and you put it together with Moderna. And it's not 60.6, 68, 66.69, it's 60.6. These things are done purposely. These things are hidden in plain sight, but this is the evildoers. This is the schemers that both the scriptures have been speaking about. If any man defiles the temple, I, Yahuwah, will kill him. Try putting all of this into context. It takes so much. The evil men of 2 Timothy that grew worse and worse, deceiving many. That's what we're speaking about here. Start here with my temple first, because judgment begins with the house of Elohim. And you are the temple. We need to preserve our temple. We need to preserve our spirit. We need to keep on keeping on and walking and walking. Nothing has changed. The same vials are out there. And I want to encourage you, the message hasn't changed, to stand strong and equip yourself. And with that, I'm going to welcome our resident host and guest, Dr. Pidgeon. You know, Stephen, I just praise you all the time. And as I was getting ready for this program, for coming into relationship with you, it is Yah who has brought this relationship together. This is not man-made. The fact that you are using your wealth of life, of academia, your knowledge, and your studies in the Hebrew and everything to relate to people that have been walking in the wilderness is no small thing, because I see his hand upon your life touching so many multiple people's lives, just by the comments coming in, reading what is happening, knowing the call that Yah has put upon you for such a time as this. And it's not easy, Stephen. I know it's not easy, but I just want to say you have so many standing with you, thanking Yah, Yahuwah, and the Ruach HaKodesh for your kingdom impact in this time, because it is the saving of souls. So thank you, Stephen. And with that, I want to open up to you to share.
Well, thank you, Jesse. I mean, I'll just say this, it's not about me. It is always about Yahweh. It's not about me.
Yes.
And the work that we have done has been a very interesting calling for me, because, I was kind of stumbling around in the dark, really, even when I was working as a lawyer. I was thinking about it the whole time I was working as a lawyer. I was trying to do a just cause, Not initially. Initially, I started out as a business lawyer,
Really?
And yeah, I wanted to do things like in the back room, writing options and writing warrants and writing initial public offerings and this kind of thing, and to be an academic in the back room.
So different.
It was very funny, because when I started with a business law group, and I was there and I was expecting to do that, just what I just told you. And I wasn't there not a month before the clients were demanding that I take on their jury trial. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of unusual for a guy who's been out of law school for a month, but if you're insisting, I'll go do it. So anyway, I ended up first chairing a jury trial. It was a lawsuit over $9.5 million, and I was defending the alleged perps. And anyway, we had a very successful trial, I guess. None of these things are ever completely successful, but we did what we could do. But I ended up being, a trial lawyer. And so I was forever in front of judges, and when you're in front of a judge, you're everything is on the line. And I was explaining to my kids over the weekend, we were down fishing in the Kenai, and it was such a spectacular blessing to be there. I mean, just unbelievable. It had been raining for the last 10 days, everything was saturated, and we get down to the river and it's dry, no rain all day. And we ended up, so we pole fished for a while, and then we ended up going out what's called dip netting. We were dip netting at the mouth of the Kenai, where basically you walk out into the ocean there, being salt water, and you walk out into the ocean and you have your big dip net, you stick it out there and you wait for the fish to come in it, And so we had a very successful weekend fishing. But I was talking to the kids, and I was telling them about how, when we testify, it's never about us. It is about the workings of the Ruach. It is about the workings of Yah. It is about what His hand does,
Yeah.
And even in doing defense work, my clients would be like, I'm not going into that courtroom. I don't want to ever see a judge. I don't want to ever be exposed to that. It's a fearful place. And it is a very fearful place because the person sitting on the bench makes life or death decisions about people all week long, right?
Yeah.
Well, you've come into me and the facts before me indicate that your behavior is outside this circle of approved behavior. And if we demonstrate that this particular set of facts proves that you did this particular activity, which is outside the circle of approved behavior, then I'm going to have to sentence you to die in prison. Or I'm going to have to take away all of your liberty and all of your wealth, and destroy your family, destroy your reputation, and assign you to a concrete room where you will be dressed up in pajamas and eating cockroach-laden food for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, this is a decision that a judge is going to make, right? And when they put somebody into the penal system. And in the United States, we have more than 7 million people in prison. We have the highest imprisoned population in the world, above every other nation by a long shot. And, so these kinds of things happen inside the courtroom. So my quest as a lawyer was not to make money, it was to make a living, assuredly, but it was to take on the just cause and try to do the best I could in these kinds of settings. So I was always kind of looking for the cause, not for the money, if you will.
Yeah.
Well,
no, that's not.
But Yah called me out of that, and he called me out of that early on, and he said, well, okay, I'm going to call you into mission work. And I'm thinking, well, I'm willing to go. Yeah. What have you got in mind?
What year was that, Stephen? What year did you start to hear his voice about mission work?
Oh, that was 2002.
Okay. Wow.
He said, I'm taking you into mission work. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm willing to go. And at the time I was kind of afraid of flying, frankly.
Really?
He says, oh yeah, we're going to go. Now let's get on this plane and go to Russia. And I'm thinking, Russia, I had something in mind nicer than that, but if you're sending me to Russia, let's do it. And the next thing I'm in Moscow,
Yeah.
And that mission, of course, changed my life. Why? Because it was during that mission that I was baptized in the Ruach HaKodesh.
Wow.
And I was baptized in the Ruach, not by the hand of man, but by the working of the Ruach, who did it himself. And he said, I'm going to baptize you in me. And my life changed just entirely. I mean, entirely. I don't know how else to tell you this, but suddenly, I couldn't wait to be back in Russia, because in my heart, I believe that's where the Ruach is. He's hanging out in Russia. So I'm going to go back to Russia where I could see him again.
Yeah.
It was really perceivable. You could sense the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, like a little ceiling of clouds, like right overhead, over the whole country, over the whole nation. right?
Wow, really?
Like, this is incredible, So I wanted to go back and experience more of it. And of course, the more you go back, um, the more the chrome breaks off the bumper, and you see the underlying metal, right?
Yeah.
It's not so pretty. And we went back and we saw some very interesting sides of Russia that were dangerous and harmful and impoverished, and on and on and on. But it was very good for me to see this. But when I came back, I committed my life to whatever Yah was going to do. Well, the very first thing he did was to burn the dross off the sword
Yeah.
with 22 months of correction. So my income dropped by 80% for 22 months in a row.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm thinking, we had just bought a house. I'm thinking, how are we going to pay for this house? How are we going to do this? How are we going to get through this? And it was, 22 months, that's almost 2 years, right?
Mm.
And here we were. And finally, it was coming into this period. And finally, I was at a point where, like, okay, well, we're going to lose everything now. And I went upstairs and, threw my Bible down on the bed. I just said, that's it. Why are you doing this to me? Why am I being persecuted? Why are you allowing this to happen? And he said, be still and know that I am Yah. Be still and know that I am Yah.
Yeah.
And so I heard that, and so I shut my mouth, right? But I also knew that it was ending. And I knew this 2 weeks before it ended. It's going to end. This is going to end. And it did end, and things began to turn around. But I was completely changed at that point. I was a different lawyer. I was a different person. I was much more involved in, then from that point forward, I was a missionary, not a lawyer. I was a missionary who also practiced law, And so Yah then was putting me here, putting me here, putting me there, putting me here. I ended up in a very tight interface with Ukrainian and Russian churches in the Pacific Northwest. And I knew all of and Georgian churches. So I knew all the pastors from all the Russian pastors from Spokane and from Kelso and from Vancouver and from Tacoma and from Everett, all these, and they were quite a community. And they were warriors. And they were warriors in the Ruach. They would be praying in the Ruach, and they acted in the Ruach, and they were warriors on behalf of righteousness in the state of Washington. They were the ones that stood up when no one else would.
Mm.
And so really that war, I guess, began in 2002. And we were on the battle lines in 2010 and in 2012. We were on the front lines of the battle lines, trying to hold on to marriage, trying to hold on to some kind of righteous social order. And, when we lost the battle in Washington, which we did, we lost the battle in Washington in 2010.
Mm.
And in 2010, the voters voted in, what do they call it? It wasn't same-sex marriage, but it was partnerships, domestic partnerships.
Okay.
Domestic partnerships had all of the same tenets of marriage, but it wasn't called marriage. And this was the objective of the LGBT community. All we want is just equal rights. Well, that wasn't all they wanted, because 2 years later they were on the ballot with, well, now we want marriage. We want the name marriage.
Yeah.
California had already had an election on this and had said, no, we're not going to have same-sex marriage. Oregon had already had an election on this and said, no, we're not going to have it. So no state had had any electoral approved same-sex marriage.
Mm.
And so we began the battle. And the state government passed same-sex marriage in a totally unlawful law. And so then the pastors were trying to get together to confront it. And we were in the middle of this. We were in the thick of this. And a good friend of mine, Ken Hutcherson, had been on the front of this battle for a long time. And so Ken called a pastor meeting. And so we had all of the top pastors in the state meeting in Olympia, Washington, to confront this particular legislation that had just passed. Well, while we were at the meeting, and so I had proposed an initiative to define marriage as between one man and one woman.
Yeah.
And it was that simple. There was nothing any more than that, because the old law used to say marriage was between a man and his wife.
Mm.
You can't be a wife until you're married, So I wanted to clean the language up and use Torah language that it's between a man and a woman, right? Because
Mm.
Ish and Isha, right? So while we proposed this and we had all the pastoral approval to move forward with this, there were a handful of pastors that immediately went behind our back, sabotaged us, and proceeded to take on an entirely different referendum. And not only did they take on an entirely different referendum, but they took all of the money out of the campaign. They hired people, literally hired people. They paid one woman $85,000 over 6 months to go through the state and rip up our petitions for our initiative and tell the church leaders, shred it, shred it. So we had this huge divisiveness, this sledgehammer of divisiveness come right down in the middle of the community. Bam, right? And it was an intentional devastation done by a group of saboteurs who wanted to ensure that there was same-sex marriage in Washington. And they were in the church.
Mm.
They were in the church. There was a specific group of pastors and other leaders that were in the church that were doing this.
Mm.
So we confronted them. We confronted them gently, but we did confront them. And we said, what are you doing? And why aren't you supporting our petition? We're not giving you dime one. We're doing this, we're doing that. And of course, what they were doing between me and you was money laundering.
Wow.
But that goes without saying. That's another issue.
Mm.
But this whole thing had been completely contrived. And I can remember sitting in a room, Jessica. We had a meeting with some of the stalwart leaders who had really given up a lot. I mean, we're talking about people. I mean, it cost me $130,000 personally to try to fight against domestic partnerships in 2010. And so we had people that were, true warriors in the field. Val Stevens, Matt Shea, Larry Stickney, and then the pastors, Pastor Andre and Pastor Leo, and all these various pastors who were Ukrainian and Russians, who for them this was completely anathema to anything you could imagine. They weren't going to allow it to happen. And I mean, to give an example, Pastor Leo's guys were physically assaulted on the corners, holding up signs. They had people smashing girls over the head with sticks, splashing them while they drove by on the road, physically assaulting them, with fists, kicking them, this kind of thing. All of this was going on during this campaign. And Larry, my friend Larry, was threatened. I mean, these guys were pulling up to his house at midnight, threatening to shoot ammo into his house.
Yeah.
He had to move his girls who had bedrooms in the front of his house to the back of his house so that they would not be shot in the middle of the night. Well, anyway, all of this was going on. And so this group got together and we had a meeting at a place called Sean O'Donnell's. And in this meeting, there were 26 leaders from 26 different venues that were coming together to put together a unified front to confront this. There were two people there on the cell phone the whole time we were there talking, conspiring. One of them was a Jesuit operative, and he was conspiring with other politicians in the state to sabotage everything we were doing. Well, we lost. And we lost. It was a very close vote, 51 to 51 point something to 48 point something. And the electorate prevailed in Washington in establishing same-sex marriage. Well, as soon as an electoral body voted in favor of it, the dam broke and the flood went all over the world. Went all over the world. I mean, it wasn't shortly thereafter until Pope Francis was embracing it and all the corporations were embracing it. The federal government was embracing it. Even though we had a Defense of Marriage Act passed by Congress, that was ditched. And everything, and the dam fell and the sewage went everywhere. I mean, what else can I tell you?
Yeah.
And everywhere. And so it went all over the world and we lost that battle. And since we've lost that battle, I mean, I knew what the real numbers were. I knew what the real problem was. That once a society embraces that, marriage goes out the window among young people. They don't care. What's the point of marriage? It's only a piece of paper. And divorce goes up through the roof. And then, of course, the behavior begins to change. Well, they kept telling us that's all we want. That's all we want. That's all we want. Well, now look what they're doing. They're grooming children in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, and convincing children that they all need to be transgendered. They need to have sexual assignment surgery. that they should be doing it without parental consent. They've opened the door for the legitimization of pedophilia. All of this stuff is going on now, right? And parents going, hey, and then when parents stand up at the school board and say, you can't teach that, the FBI calls them domestic terrorists. Six of these, a SWAT team over to their house to arrest them for complaining at the school board, right? And so this is the kind of, so that loss in Washington was a huge loss. It was a huge loss. And of course, from that loss, the newspapers associated, I mean, my friend Larry Stickney was absolutely assassinated. I mean, absolutely, totally assassinated. And it almost killed him. I mean, he ended up coming down with cancer. My friend Ken Hutcherson did come down with cancer and died from it.
Wow.
And he had 74 death threats given to him in writing. One, which was delivered in writing to him 8 feet from where he was sitting. He was in his office, and they handed this written death threat to his secretary right in front of his office. Ken, you couldn't go to Ken's house. If you went by Ken's house and you parked in front of his house, your car would have its windshield broken and the paint keyed if you were inside for any longer than 5 minutes. You couldn't visit. You couldn't go to visit his house, right? He had to operate behind locked doors all the time. And anyway, it ended up killing him. Some of the other pastors, the Ukrainian pastors, were persecuted by the AG's office. These were people that had fled Ukraine and fled Russia in order to gain citizenship status, to flee the persecution that was happening in atheist nations. And they get to the States and they're persecuted again, right? And, Pastor Alex ended up in the hospital he was having panic attacks and almost had heart because of what they were doing to him, And so the point I'm making is that, yes, whenever you take a stand for righteousness and you say, gee, this is what we should do in a social order, we should follow a righteous path. Yeah, you're going to be persecuted. You're going to be persecuted. And people don't want to hear it. And, and then, of course, the kinds of things they said about me were horrible. And then people came after me. And, and Yah was blessing me in many respects because my dad has always told me, stay out of the bite, right? How do you stay alive? Stay out of the bite, right? Take that word of advice. But the fact is that ultimately, at some point, you're going to be in the bite. And when you're in the bite, what are you going to do? My prayer is that when I'm in the bite on behalf of the name of Yahweh.
Wow.
That's my prayer. And so anyway,
Powerful.
I felt like Paul many times, like when the guys all got together and said, we're not going to eat or drink until Paul is dead. Right? You remember this in the book of Acts, right? We're not going to eat or drink until Paul is dead. There have been people that have made that commitment about me, right? We're going to get that guy. We're going to destroy that guy. We're going to kill that guy, go after him, get him, and wreck his life. And, and it's happened, when you were mentioning here in your opening remarks, that it's unrelenting. It is unrelenting. It's unrelenting. They don't give up. And if you're, unless you've given up, they don't give up.
Very true.
This morning, I'll just be truthful with you, Jesse. This morning I was praying, why didn't I give up a long time ago? Why didn't I quit when I was 21? Why didn't I just follow a different path? Why didn't I just die when I was 40? Why didn't I just forget this? Why didn't I do something different? Why? And, particularly when it comes to the work of the Sefer, this Sefer is not about me. It's not about me. I mean, I didn't write a word of it, right?
That's right.
Right. Yeah. It's Yah's book. And, he came to me and he said, look, I want you to do this project. And I'm thinking, well, okay, we're going to do it because I'm dumb enough to be fearless enough to do it. Right. Let's jump. Right. And then I had no idea what I was jumping into. I was jumping into the lion's den. Right. And believe me, there were lots of lions, some of them which were, old and had tetanus on their teeth, and some which were young and vicious, But either way, I got chewed and chewed and chewed and chewed. And there isn't a day that goes on that there isn't somebody calling me a heretic, calling me a blasphemer, calling me this, calling me that, calling me the other thing. And people who want to do nothing but hurt and harm this ministry. there's not a day that goes on that doesn't happen, you know.
Mhm.
And so for me, I can't sit back and say, oh, well, let's go to war. Let's break out our swords and go attack that attacking army. That's not what
Mhm.
God has called me to do. I'm not supposed to be doing that. Instead, what we're supposed to do is we are supposed to continue in our path of pointing out the narrow
Yes.
pathway, the water on one side, the fire on the other. We have to point
Wow.
out the narrow pathway, walk in his paths, walk in his ways. And this is difficult because, you know, there are so many people who are so caught up in religion, right?
Mhm.
Well, I would like to talk to you, Dr. P, but you don't use the KJV, and I'm KJV only.
Mhm.
I'd like to talk to you, Dr. P, but you're a baller. You know, you believe in a round earth instead of a flat earth. So
Mhm.
therefore, you're a sun worshiping dog. You know, you're a heliocentric sun worshiping dog. So I'm
Mhm.
not talking to you anymore. Or,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's one thing after another. People have their religiosity. Well, I hate the Jews and I hate everything about the Khazarian mafia Jews. And you're just a Judaizer. That's why you keep the Sabbath, because you're a Judaizer.
Yeah.
And I hate the Jews because they're the Khazarian mafia, right? Therefore, I hate you. And therefore, I hate everything about what you're talking about, right?
Mhm.
So I get this from, you know, I get this from every kind of camp you can imagine, that people
Yeah.
are trapped in their fortress. And in their fortress, they do the traditions this way, the
Mhm.
traditions of the Westminster Confession, which I
Mhm.
talked about on Thursday night, the traditions
Mhm.
of the Westminster Confession. Those traditions are inaccurate. Okay, they're scripturally inaccurate, and the machinations of the Puritans, they had a worldview predicated upon some teachings that were scripturally inaccurate, but they wanted to believe them, and part of this inaccuracy came from the English translations.
Mhm.
As in the English translations, you get a word like, let me give you an example. You have the word autos in Greek. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, autos means he, but it also means she. It also means they or them,
Mhm.
himself, herself, itself, themself. It means all of those,
Mhm.
autos. Okay, so when you look at John 1 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim.
Mhm.
Elohim was with the Word in the beginning. Now, Now, when you say that, oh, he was with the word in the beginning, right? But the question is, it's autos. So what you see in the Sefer, and it's also what you see in the KJV. The interpreter said, well, wait a minute, we can't use him. Why can't we use him? Because it's autos, right?
Mhm.
And no context. All right, I want to get the
Yeah,
passage back here.
please.
So it reads, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with at Elohim, and Elohim was the Word. Verse 2, the same was in the beginning with at Elohim. Now, the same, why are you using the word the same? Because there's no context in that opening verse when you're talking about the logos, of whether the logos was male, female, neuter, plural, singular. There's no context. There's no context whatsoever. Therefore, a proper interpretation is the same. But when you get into some English interpretations, it would read, he was in the beginning with et Elohim. Now, it's proper to translate nomos as he. That's one of its possibilities, right?
Mhm.
But if you use he, now you've personified the logos with specificity.
Mhm.
Okay, now
Mhm.
compare that, if you will, to the discussions about the Ruach HaKodesh. When you're talking about nomos in reference to the Ruach HaKodesh, somebody elects to say he in the English language when
Mhm.
that's not what is there in the Greek language.
Mhm.
One possibility, but it's not every possibility. And as a consequence, because somebody put he in relationship to the Ruach HaKodesh, the Scottish Rite Presbyterians believe, oh, well, that's God in three
Three
persons.
times. Mhm.
Just like that, you
Mhm.
see? And it happens because you're not reading the Greek, you're reading the English. You're reading the anglicized version, which has this reducto ad absurdia. It is, you've reduced it to the absurd. And there's many, many places where you see this. You see it in the Hebrew, and you see it in the Greek when it's translated into English. So the Scottish Rite Presbyterians who made these political demands on the Parliament of the UK, when those demands were made, the Parliament of the UK came back and said, you know what, you need to buttress this with some scripture, since this is your doctrinal view. You need to put some scripture. Show me the scripture that says that the Bible is only 66 books. Find it. Because interestingly enough, the church didn't find it. All the way through the Council of Trent in 1534, they didn't find it. The Eastern Orthodox Church has never found that stricture. How did you guys find it? Well, there is no edict that the Bible is only 66 books until you get to the Westminster Confession, which was a political decision. And by the way, the Scottish Rite Presbyterians were also demanding a premise on Christian liberty. And the premise on Christian liberty is we're free to do what we wilt, do what thou wilt, and it's all forgiven. Now, I got to tell you, that premise right there, Jesse, is a premise that was touted by Martin Luther. And this premise was also touted by Sabbatai Tzvi, who was the head of the Jacobin movement of the Kabbalah. It was touted by Rasputin in the Orthodox position, and it was touted by the Scottish Rite Presbyterians. Do what thou wilt is the total teaching of the New Testament. That's the Satanic Bible.
Yes.
And so the Anglicans had enough influence in Britain to say, we're not going to allow that particular premise to be in this Westminster Confession. They eliminated it on Christian liberty, right?
Wow.
But bear in mind that the Scottish Rite Presbyterians, who were Puritan, had been influenced by Knights Templar, who were Baphomet worshippers. Following the destruction of the leadership of the Knights Templar, half of them went to Scotland and the other half went to Switzerland.
Yeah.
And from that Baphomet movement would come the Scottish Rite Masonry. And Scottish Rite Masonry has been very aggressive and controls virtually all of the Western world. That is the true religion of the Western world. It's Masonry. It is not Christianity. If you want to take a poll, go take this poll. How many of you identify yourselves as Christian? And you get some number. How many identify yourself, and if you got a truthful response, how many of you identify yourselves as Christians, but you're also Masons?
Yes.
Let's get another number, right? Let's get another number, a number that cannot be disclosed because it's a secret society. And yet this secret society, demanding that people follow a redacted Bible predicated on forged texts like the Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Vaticanus, people are supposed to look to that text, and while the Masons are in the back room having a secret meeting, worshiping the Baphomet, and in many cases sacrificing virgins, and sacrificing children, and sacrificing women, and so forth, which has gone on in all over the place where these Masonic lodges are had.
Yeah.
So when you talk about this, okay, so so when we talk about strengthening the faith, strengthening the faith comes down to this. Mashiach tells everybody, if you don't eat my flesh and you don't drink my blood, you have no part of me. And my flesh is real food and my blood is real drink. And everybody left him. Thousands abandoned him. We're not following that guy anymore. He's weird. Then he goes to Peter, Kepha, and he says, how about you? Are you going to leave too? And Kepha said the one thing that I find to be true in my life. Where else do we go?
Yeah. It's quite amazing.
Where else do we go? There is nowhere else.
No.
There's nowhere else. And so this has to do with the oneness of Yah, right? Echad. The oneness. Yah is the only game in town. And when you understand Echad, you realize that this great omnipotent omniscience, which occupies an infinite number of dimensions infinitely, is above and beyond everything. think about how alone Yah is.
Yeah.
He's one, and he's absolutely alone.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. You know,
And
Stephen, I just want to encourage you with this as you continue. Our very own Miss Sherry Slammer, she said this, and I think this will minister to many here. I was supernaturally led to the Sefer. I know Yahuwah commissioned the work. Yah is most certainly with Dr. P. I really felt that was necessary to say to you, but also for many listening here today.
well, thank you, Sherry, and thank you, Jesse, for saying that. I mean, Yah put it on us. I mean, and I'm telling you, there were things when we first started into this project, we weren't particularly bright. We're like, well, what are we doing? Well, I don't know. Do this. Well, what do you think? Should we do that? Yeah, let's pray about it. Let's do that. Okay. Well, how about this? Yeah, yeah. And so things were coming together, and we were just working. I mean, Brad and I were doing 40 to 60 hours a week while we were working full-time jobs. And we did that for 7 years,
Wow.
trying to move the text into a proper condition. And initially, we weren't going to produce this for anything other than our Bible fellowship. That's what the book was
Really?
produced for. Oh yeah, it was going to be for our group, so we would have something to read. And I mean, Jesse, when we first published, we published this book with a company that was so bad. The books were so bad. I mean, they would fall apart on the third reading. And, half the time they'd send us the books with the cover upside down. I mean, it was just horrendous, so bad. And, but we got to a point where the iterations got better and better. And then one point we had a version called the Kodesh Sepharim was the version of it.
Oh.
In this bad publication. And I'm trying to go home with this book, and I can't get home with it without somebody buying it from me. Can I have that book? Well, no, this is mine. Well, I'll pay you for it right now. Just give me the book, right? And literally, so I went out to preach in Spokane. My book was absolutely trashed. I mean, it was beat up. It was broken apart. The bindings were broken. I had to stuff pages back in, this kind of thing, And Kendrick, he was the sound man there. Just what a beautiful brother this guy is, man. Fantastic guy. And he was, he's just, I want that book. You can't have it. It's mine. It's the only one I've got. This is my book. I'm not giving it to you. No, you got to give it to me. Okay. All right, Kendrick. Fine. I did, and he turned out to be such a powerful Torah teacher. And what a phenomenal guy he is, right? Just
Wow.
anyway,
Yeah.
but so that's what happened, So there we were. So that at that point, my sister-in-law said, "My son wants one of your books," and I said, "Okay, well, I have this," and I wanted to make it a nice gift for him. I said, "Well, I got this book, but it is so trashed." I took it downtown. I said, "Could you put a leather?" The cover was upside down, so I took it down. I said, "Can you put a leather cover on this?" And the guy's like, "Who printed this pile of junk?" He says, "I'll put a leather cover up and a cover on it, and I'm going to put new glue on it, and I'm going to put it back together and make it into a decent book." I said, "Okay, well, what do you think we should do?" He says, go to this printer in Michigan. They'll print your book." So we did, and that's when we formed Separate Publishing Group. The printer said, "This is how you're going to print it. You're going to print it in this size. You're going to use this kind of paper. You're going to do it like this. It's going to be a sewn binding." We're like, we didn't know any of this, right? We're like, "How do you do this?" "What's a Smythe sewn book?" Yeah, we do it like, really? Okay. All right. So then we were praying, and we printed 2,000 books, and we prayed for 18 months that we would actually be able to get a second printing.
Wow.
And Yah blessed us with a second printing, so that's what happened. And if we've never stopped working on, developing the best possible text we can for this ministry, to be able to deliver the best possible text we can. And, Jesse, I'll tell you, yeah, it's hard work because, people do single us out. I mean, when we first published the Sefer the very first time in a printed edition, we didn't have it out for 2 weeks before a guy writes us and says, "You people are heretics."
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing you know, the very first video to come up on YouTube was "Pidgeon's a heretic and a blasphemer, and the Sefer is blasphemy." The very first video to come up, right?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out this guy who made this video, he doesn't believe in the Gospel of John, and he's really quite wayward. But nonetheless, I mean, I was completely destroyed. I mean, like, oh, here they go. We weren't planning on doing any social media at all. But what do you do when people are out there smashing you in the face with a sledgehammer?
Yeah.
You know. So
You
then
could,
we had to come out and present. We had to present what it was that we were doing, and so that's what Sefer Moments was all about. You
mm,
know, on that Sefer Publishing Group YouTube channel, we have Sefer
mm,
Moments. It's
mm.
just a huge discussion about what's in the Sefer and why we made the decisions we did.
Yeah.
So the blog space, it's about why did you guys say this? Well, we said it because of this. This is what we
Mm.
found, right?
Yeah. And you're doing some new Sefer moments very shortly. Is that right?
Yeah, Sefer Moments, yeah. And
Mm,
I'm going to be returning to Sefer Moments actually here very soon. I'm
mm.
going to be doing shorts
That'd be
instead
great.
of our teaching on Thursday night. I'm
Yeah.
going to be doing shorts that are 5 to 7 minutes,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I'm going to return to Sefer Moments, and that'll be on the Sefer Publishing Group YouTube channel, by the way.
Yeah. And
And then
actually, sorry, go on.
no, go ahead, Jess. I've
Well,
talked
I
enough.
just wanted to, we've got 2 minutes, but on Friday, we did the first 40 minutes dedicating it to Sefer Academy and the UK trip. And people were actually asking for that program. So we've made it a separate program, and I'm premiering that tomorrow before your live Hebrew class. So that all the information is there, and it will be on the Sefer playlist as well as Eating While Honey and Locusts. And people can share that because that's what they've asked for. And you never know if our programs can go on YouTube. So I made it a separate program just in case our Friday program couldn't go to air. So people just be aware of that. It's premiering tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time. And you'll get a notification if you're all subscribed to what time that is in your area.
Well, that's fantastic, Jess. That's fantastic. And you and I am gonna. I still have to get my own StreamYard here, and then you and I can talk about other things. Because if you look at StreamYard, like look at our screen right now, it's beautiful. We've got 2 screens up,
Yeah.
and the beauty of StreamYard is that you can do it just like this, 2, or you can do 1 plus 1 and 2, or
Yeah.
or you can do a single screen, and you can make that share screen stuff happen
Mm,
instantly, and that's a very nice feature that's not
yeah.
available on the Zoom function that I use for most of my meetings. You
Mm,
got choices, one guy or everybody, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's great.
so anyway, I'm looking forward to that, and we're going to talk some more too.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that inside the Sefer community, bear in mind that we're called to suffer. It's not you're not called to strike back or to act with vengeance or to curse. You're called to bless.
Yes.
And you're called to respond to a slap in the face with a blessing.
Mm,
And this sometimes can be a very difficult thing, and it's difficult when you keep getting slapped to stand back up and walk, but you have
mm.
to do it.
Of course, yeah. And you know what? People who walk in discernment, the called out ones, they won't be deceived, Stephen. They won't, because they can recognize witchcraft and they can recognize an assignment. And they stand with you because they stand with Yah. And they see that behind you, Yah is behind you, and you are navigating them into eternity. You are helping them strengthen themselves in this lifetime. So I just want to say that to you, that nothing can come against you, and that Yah is the vindicator. He goes before you. I know the suffering is great, and it will get even more. But those people have discernment that he has called out to speak to. And so I just want to thank you again for the investment that you put into this program, into this relationship with the United Kingdom, with Europe, and what you pour out, because it's at such a cost. I know that, Stephen. And on behalf of everyone wider than the Sefer family, we're with you. We thank Yah for you, and we pray for you always fiercely. And with that, audience, I want to bless you and thank you for your continued fellowship. Very quickly, I'm not going to be playing an outro because this is important. Enoch 1, the word of the blessing of Enoch, how he blessed the elect and the righteous who were to exist in the time of trouble, rejecting all righteousness and wicked. Enoch, a righteous man with Elohim, answered and spoke while his eyes were open, and he saw a holy vision in heaven. This is what the angels showed me. This is the purpose of this programs, of our work, and what Yah has called as a mission field to Dr. Stephen at this time. Understand how hard it is. We thank you so much for walking with us, persevering with us. Yah bless you all. Thank you so, so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Now I am become death, the despair of worlds.
Ever seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side, baby? Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the despair of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there, somewhere.